This video was brought to you by us, Slidebean. Make beautiful slide presentations in no time. Get 1 free month by signing up at slidebean.com/YouTube. In this episode of Startup Forensics, we're going to talk about one of the coolest clothing brands in the world. That's the North Face. That's right. It seems like the brand has existed for decades and that their high-end products last forever. And it's kind of true. But the North Face has a rocky history of successes and failures. It went from the precise and technical world of outdoor adventure to the urban streets and rap music to becoming a popular icon. The brand has faced bankruptcy several times, and at one point it was rescued as part of a very, very cheap merger. Since then, the North Face has slowly risen to the top where it stands today. But now the world is very competitive and the retail industry faces tough questions regarding its future. So it seems that the North Face story isn't over yet. Without a doubt, there's still more adventure to come. This is a brand that has survived for decades through thick and thin and still hangs on. So today, we're going to talk about how the North Face was born, the first signs of turmoil, another iteration, another North, internal chaos, revived yet again. This is Startup Forensics, the North Face. How the North Face was born. Our story begins in the 60s. That's right, 50 years ago already. Two adventurers and explorers, Douglas Tompkins and Susie Bell, wanted to create the best clothing for people like them. That's adventure seekers. Back in those days, adventure equipment was bulky and unattractive, so their idea was to create efficient outdoor gear of the utmost quality. And yes, their products weren't exactly cheap. Actually, the complete opposite. But their target demographic understood this. In fact, price didn't seem to matter. This all felt like a risky move at first, since neither of them had sales experience and their products were really expensive. But they had a very clear understanding of what adventurers needed. They were adventurers. In fact, the name North Face comes from the harshest, coldest, and therefore more challenging part of any mountain in the northern hemisphere of the world. The north face of the mountain. When they launched in 1964, even with a small store, they went all out. They hired none other than the Grateful Dead. Within just 2 years, North Face would be a hit, but Tompkins wanted something different. So in 1968, he sold his shares to Kenneth Klopp for just $50,000. It's not like Tompkins didn't know business. Years later, he would create, along with Bell, the brand Spirit, a standard in 80s fashion. But he wanted adventure, so he sold everything and bought the biggest place of privately owned land in the world. Google it. But let's get back to the North Face. Under Klopp's guidance, the North Face's growth was small and measured during the 70s, and their catalog was pretty limited. Their first products were backpacks and one coat, the Sierra Parka, with the first tent designed and produced in 1974. But the North Face's core idea remained intact. Their tents had excellent thermal resistance and were lightweight, making them very easy to carry. And innovation wasn't only restricted to tents. The North Face loved Gore-Tex, the famous waterproof fabric, making it a staple in its products. The brand became known for being innovative and cool. They even collaborated with Apple back in the day. Why not? Both brands broke out of the norm. It seemed right, and it did work for a little while. The brand garnered an underground following and slowly spread outside the world of adventure. The bulky, imposing coats became trademarks in the rap scene. Artists like the Beastie Boys and Notorious B.I.G. gave the brand more exposure and a completely different audience.
Take a Gucci bag and a North Face off her back.
And this would be key in the 90s. First, signs of turmoil. During the 80s, the brand became the one and only choice for skiing and mountain climbing. In fact, they were so established that the North Face was the only premium brand for outdoor activities. Finally, as the 80s drew close to an end, the North Face was growing fast. And unfortunately, it was then that Klopp and the management team made decisions that would cost them dearly. So first, in order to have control of the entire production process, the brand began manufacturing all its products instead of outsourcing part of them. There was only one problem. They weren't ready for the next level of manufacturing. Orders were delayed, some products ran out, and there was no internal stock control. Also, they went ahead and opened outlet stores all over the US to sell off discount products and materials. But they were a premium store, so why have an outlet? For cheap products, The North Face isn't cheap, is it? Their customers had never purchased the North Face for its price, so the stores were confusing. Customers didn't really like them. There was then a lethal equation: logistical chaos and a lot of empty stores. So despite their successes, the North Face was simply not profitable. Klopp decided to pull the plug, and in 1988, he sold the brand to Odyssey Holdings. OHI, well, didn't do a great job. They did try though. The early 90s brought in winds of change, or at least that was the intention. They brought Marsden Carson as the North Face directors. Stores were closed and the catalog reduced to only the profitable products. And it seemed that the North Face was now starting to make a profit. But OHI went bankrupt. 1993 saw them file for Chapter 11 protection. During 1994, the North Face operated at a loss, but it was just too much. It eventually had to be sold at an auction for just $62 million to a new group of investors. Another iteration, another North. This new North Face had one aim: regular people. They also want high quality clothes, right? The company had already seen that the brand appealed to young rappers in New York City. So how could they expand on this? Well, they did take advantage of the whole rap thing. Remember, this is the 90s. Rap was big. Urban New York became a seeping ground for rap music and gangster fashion. So the North Face created more jackets and outerwear. And it worked. LL Cool J, Method Man, and many others just looked really good in North Face. And young kids wanted to emulate them. So the North Face became the brand to have. In fact, it became so attractive that their famous Nuptse jackets were priced by muggers. One fan of North Face, photographer and almost mug victim Pravan Kuntmala, recalls, New York, especially in Queens and the Bronx, is the epicenter of North Face collecting. And some of that collecting is by mugging, I guess, even shoplifting. But it didn't stop there. The streets of New York City were just a gateway to the world. Yes, they were still very, very expensive. Some of them were worth $600 worth of today's dollars. But everybody liked the new casual wear that was resistant and looked great. So it was only natural that they opened a store in Columbus Avenue, New York City, which became a hub for everything North Face. And just when things were looking great, then came the whole accounting issue. Internal chaos. It seems that even if the North Face changes hands, it somehow drags along business issues from the past. The 90s were very good years, but kinks began to show. Logistic issues were still plaguing them. Winter gear was delivering when winter was already over, and camping gear was late for camping season. But the problem went a lot deeper. Turns out that between 1999 and 2000, the North Face's financial reports were false, and their stock prices were inflated. In 2000, North Face had told its shareholders sales were $238 million, when in reality, there had been a net loss of $100 million. So naturally, shareholders sued. Even the SEC got involved. The lawsuit caused so much a ruckus that NASDAQ halted their trading until things sorted out. It was a truly complicated moment for the brand. There in the background, it echoed that Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company's value plummeted from $17 per share to around $2 per share, and there was no turning back. Remember how that first auction got them $63 million? Well, this time around, when VF, the current owners, purchased it, they only paid $25 million. So let's talk about BF for a moment. This is one of the biggest apparel companies in the world. Only in the US, they control 55% of the backpack market. Besides North Face, they own Jansport, Eagle Creek, Eastpak, Timberland, and Kipling. The company knows outdoor gear, so hopefully they could turn this story around. Revived yet again. The North Face seemed profitable, and with their knowledge, VF could finally make this right. Their strategy was simple. They invested heavily in producing regular clothing for people who didn't really do outdoor activities, but still wanted to look, maintaining their high quality and good looks. And that's not the reason why I own North Face jackets. It was also time to branch to other markets, so they partnered with designers such as Junya Watanabe in 2006. The 2000s were really good for the North Face, and more young people seeped in the urban culture of chaotic city streets, dabbed in the brand. Rap still had a close relationship with the North Face. Just last year, Drake purchased a classic North Face/Apple coat for $825 at an auction. The brand had managed, through the rocky paths, to maintain the classic adventurer customer, the rapper world, and now had the entire world at grasp. So North Face was a cultural icon and it grew as such. What was once a $25 million purchase averaged $2.3 billion in sales in 2016. Products now include t-shirts, shoes, hoodies, jackets, but also tents, boots, and thermal wear. VF had relied heavily on its management and manufacturing knowledge to boost the North Face to higher sales, and their products are still top-of-the-line quality. The brand is still at the top of the outdoor gear industry where, yes, it doesn't stand alone anymore. Competition is tough, but the North Face has managed to sustain itself and even expand, opening exclusive stores all over the world. VF understands what the customers want, so they segmented their products into new lines like mountain sports, lifestyles, urban exploration, and athletics. And mountain sports are still the golden goose, as they represent 61% of the North Face's entire business. But what does this all mean to the brand that started out in a small store in California? Is it still the same brand? Even VF is not immune. The retail world is suffering, and from 2013 to 2016, though their sales were at the millions, VF was unable to reach its target sales, prompting management to act and reorganize their portfolio. So, yes, to a degree, this is still that same old The North Face, with the good and the bad that comes along with selling clothes in this ever-changing world.